Hi, I'm Richie Mackay.
And I'm Davey Bolt, and you are listening to the Wrong Bias podcast. And on today's show, we've got Allan Thornhill, who is an international umpire, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to talk to Allan about the officiating side of the game. We will also have Richie's roundup and competition this week, which again is supported and sponsored by Alex Marshall Sports, so thank you to them. We'll also be answering a couple of emails that we've had and just general topics, and I think one of the big topics over the last couple of weeks has been that wonder ball from Nicky Brett, so we're going to give that our little angle as well.
Right, mate, here we are again, show number 8. And if we were married, our 8th anniversary would be the bronze, mate.
Excellent.
If we can hang on to 10, we'll get a tin of biscuits. That is just you can have the tin out of the biscuits.
Yes, absolutely. Same time on a diet.
Well, we're both on diets at the minute, but never mind. I just have to say, the last show, the interview with Sean on her, it was great to hear her passion for the sport. She came across really well. The other interview with Kevin Harrison, it was his biggest game in his career. And listening to the lad, it sounded a bit of a traumatic experience, but I think it was great for anybody who's trying to qualify to listen to that interview.
Definitely, yeah.
To give them an idea of what they're going to face when they go down there. Yeah,
and it was. I've had a couple of people, well, quite a few actually, have turned around and said that they really feel that this was the best podcast we did, and like I say, some fantastic comments about Sean, and I completely agree with it. She, bearing in mind it was over potentially a phone call, to show the passion that she had and how frustrated we both sort of were during that, and that was what people were saying. They were saying we could tell there was frustration between the two of you, but for the right reasons. Yeah. And it was like Sean said it. I think she put on one of our posts that I got her on our soapbox, but it was a soapbox that unbelievably managed to hold both of us for my weight. But we are passionate about the game. We do want to see the sport go forward, and to be honest with you, the Kevin Harrison interview was as nice for me in some respects, because I talked about this on so many occasions, and you walk into your club and I heard somebody just turn around and say, I played with my friend in the league today, and I think he must have been watching Nicky Brett, because he was absolutely outstanding. Now, straight away, it's not heckles is the wrong word, but Nicky is an absolutely fantastic player, without a shadow of a doubt. But in the same club, they've got Gary Smith playing at the club. Yeah. Now that bloke has been at the top of the game for a lot of years, and many couldn't probably argue that as a draw bowler, he's probably one of the best draw bowlers in the game ever, because he's always been renowned for being able to draw on a sixpence, and it's funny because you hear these people talking, and it's just the whole setup as it is. It was nice to hear Kevin's sort of, in a perverse kind of way, it was nice to hear how it was a traumatic experience, because it maybe just gives people the understanding that Kevin is a class bowler, and he can hold his own against any of those top 16 at any time, any place, anywhere. But unfortunately, under those circumstances, you become sort of really, really restricted in what you do. And you don't become that level, because you're on the back foot all of the way. So
you're like a rabbit in the headlights, aren't you? I suppose, to a degree.
And I think it's an interesting sort of thing that people have got this whole, they watch what's on TV, but because we've seen those players for so many years, people just think that they are the pinnacle. There is nobody can get anywhere near, because they're there all the time, so they must be the best. Yeah. Well, no, they're not. It's just they have been given the opportunity, which is a very good one, which enables them to be there year after year after year. But there is players in clubs right across the country that can match
hold
these
their
players.
Hold their own.
And their own club members don't seem to grasp that. They don't seem to understand it. And your Gary Smiths and your probably Andy Nappers and players like that. People see them as great players because they perform for England, but they don't associate them as the same as what they're seeing on the TV, which is crazy. Because those players within those local clubs should be trying to follow those top players that they've got, but they just seem to fade away into just being another club member and another player in some respects. I hope that sort of come across right, because I'm not I don't want to discredit, I'm not disrespecting Alex Marshall or Paul Foster or Nicky Brett or anybody, but they will even agree that there's so many players out there that are at their level.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, mate, 100%. We did get the photograph in the Boards International, mate. Thank you very much, Sean, for that double spread.
Absolutely.
And when I opened the magazine and showed the wife, showed me photo, she says, baby photo. I think I might have been 18, possibly 18 stone as well.
I think I opened it and went, 5 stone ago. Those were the days.
Those were the days, mate. Those were the days. Right, I also was corrected on one thing that I said in the last show regarding the number of extensions that the players had at the World Bowls competition. I said they got 4 extensions. Apparently it's 5 extensions, 6 in the final, and 1 in the tiebreaker. Well, I think it's still 4 too many anyway. I think they should be only given 1, mate. I mean, it was funny because they were doing the extension thing, but not giving themselves the time for the extension, if you know what I mean. They were sort of like leaving it till right early on, I'll have an extension. You then using 20 odd seconds of what have you.
And that's what they've always said, you wait until it gets down to that 4 or 5 seconds, or you're wasting more time. But a lot of the players now follow the ball up anyway, so they're at the head and they can see before the next ball has played the ball, and you'll see a lot of them walking back up the green because they've seen what the setup is, and 30 seconds is enough for the majority of people unless you've got a really long stance on the mat. But then
I had to laugh a couple of times because they were running back up to the mat, standing on the mat. You could see them going, when they're trying to draw within 2 inches. The heart's coming out of the sheds.
Absolutely, I've been there.
I don't know.
Even resuscitating after I've let go of the ball. 3 seconds to go.
And my other deliberate mistake actually was in the short mat Players Tour report. I did report Jonathan Payne as being German, and Ricky Pye, yep, you were right, mate, he's Belgium, which Jonathan did agree with.
Well, at least we have made our mistakes.
We do, mate, we do. And we must thank all the listeners as well, because we've hit 3,500 in total, which is a cracking effort, mate.
It is, and again, it would be nice. We make our own opinions on certain things, and that's all they are. They are opinions from our point of view. We're not trying to dictate anything. So anybody who ever wants to come back to us and have a little dig back, please feel free. You're more than welcome to come on the show. If it's anything we say specifically about an organisation, come back and have a little bit of a dig, and it would be nice to have that little bit of constructive conversation, and maybe put your point of view across as well.
And now we catch up with international umpire Allan Thornhill.
Hello.
Hello, Alan.
Hi, David. How are you?
Not too bad at all, thanks, Alan. Thanks very much for coming on the Wrong Bias podcast. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Great to have you on, Alan. I thought it was. We've done a lot of coverage over the last few shows, just speaking to individuals who actually play the sport or the various formats of the sport. I haven't seen you down at the World Championships last week. I spoke to Richie and we thought it was a great idea to just get a little bit of a different angle this week from the officiating side of the sport. When and how did you actually get involved with the sport?
Pretty similar to most people, really. You get involved through your family, and it was my grandparents that played, both sets of grandparents. I was 14 at the time. My granddad lived next door to me, and I used to take the mickey out of him going out on a Saturday afternoon in his whites and his blazer, and looked very dapper. So I used to take the mickey out of him, and then he sort of threatened me with showing me what it was all about. And it wasn't too long after that I went up the green for the first time, and almost instantly became hooked. Got taken under a wing by a couple of younger people. Bearing in mind this was quite a few years ago now, so finding another youngster of my age in the sport was pretty rare. But I got taken under the wing by a couple of people that became lifelong friends, and it just went from there, really. It wasn't too long before I was sort of playing against my granddad in competition and beating him, and he was getting very upset with it all. But yeah, I think similar to a lot of players, you get involved through the family.
I sometimes just wonder whether we should do a little bit more family orientated with regards to invites to clubs and things like that, just to try and promote that. Yeah, I know, having talked to Sean on the last podcast that we did, she was exactly the same and literally said the same as yourself.
Yeah, similar route to Sean. Obviously nowhere near as good a player as Sean, but similar sort of family backgrounds and family ties. And I think you're right. The family is all about getting together and playing the sport together. And that I think that's the great thing about this sport is it is a sport for all, and anybody of any ability can play it. And I think, we do need to make more of getting the whole family involved rather than one or two people.
Yeah, definitely.
It's actually ironic now that my mum and dad have started playing probably in the last 5-6 years, and that's purely come through my involvement and purely come through their parents' involvement as well. And
that's a little bit of the sad side of things, because it's taken that recommendation, from a family or from a friend to actually get people into the sport, rather than having the right things in place to just drag the man or woman off the street to actually come along and play it. And I think that's where the little bit of the battle is that we have, because we are relying on word of mouth rather than just the attraction of what is a great sport. And you use exactly the same word, and we use it a lot, which is the hook. It's that first time you play it, you just absolutely take to the sport, and it's just a shame we cannot get more people just to get to that point of grabbing that hook and obviously increasing the numbers that we're seeing. Moving on from that side of things, Alan, obviously you played the sport. At what point did you think to yourself, that is the area that I would want to go to? And obviously, I'm presuming you went through the qualification route to become the international umpire that you are now.
Yeah, it's difficult to actually pinpoint exactly what sort of made me decide to take the leap to the dark side and take the course. But I can remember things like what is now my grandfather-in-law was an umpire within our club, and whilst I was fairly young and starting to play at a reasonably decent level in terms of county competitions and things, I was never progressing to the final stages, never getting to the national stages. And I was sort of looking at him officiating at club finals, and I was doing a bit of marking myself as well. Bearing in mind I was still only really in my 20s, early 20s at this point, I sort of made the decision, I think, to learn a bit more about the laws, get involved through my grandfather-in-law, I suppose that's a word, grandfather-in-law, sort of support him, and he was a great mentor to me as well. So I think, there's nothing really pinpointing the point where I decided to take the exam. I was encouraged, and I was sort of coaxed into it, if you like. I did it in those days. It was a club level qualification to start with, and I did the exam and passed it, and happy days. Went out and did some marking. I can remember my very first umpiring duty, which was a bit daunting, going out there in the red blazer and tie, and like we did in the old days, and being very intimidated by the play and making sure I was on the ball and doing a good job. In terms of going further than that, I think really what was happening was that I was becoming more involved in umpiring to a point where I was getting better games. I was watching better games and better standards of play than I could ever achieve playing myself. And there was a real key point where we just missed out on qualifying for the later stages of the Surrey County competitions, which would have qualified me into the national championships down at Worthing. But at that point, I was actually officiating at Worthing, and I just thought, do I really need to keep playing and trying to mix this with umpiring at the same time? And I sort of made the decision then to take a bit more of a back seat in terms of playing the game. And things were progressing through national grade umpiring. I can remember my first view of world level bowls at the World Indoor Pairs Championship, as it was in those days. It was a separate event, a bit different to what we have now with WBT. And I travelled, just after I passed my driving test, I travelled down to Bournemouth and watched it in the Bournemouth International Centre, and that was the first sort of introduction to that sort of level. And I remember seeing Dave Higgs and Dave Phillips officiating, and I sat in the crowd and thought, it'd be nice to do that. And I can remember thinking to myself in the car on the way back, I wonder what it would take to achieve that. And I was a national grade umpire at that point, and I just put the effort in, just concentrated on getting as many games as I could. And then really the big break came in the lead up to the Manchester Commonwealth Games in '99, when I got my first junior international event down at Worthing. I've always said in my umpiring career, I've been lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and I think then that was the time when I was definitely in the right place down at Worthing. Yeah. And the selection for 2002 took a couple of years, and that was really the big break, getting that international grade.
Fantastic.
In '99.
You sort of say, it's lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Sometimes believe that you make your own luck as well. And you said sort of just before that you really had the ambition to get to that level. And I think if you're prepared to put that work in, I think those type of things, come hand in hand at times. Sometimes you miss out, but primarily if you show the enthusiasm, then people don't miss that type of thing.
You're right. And I think also we've seen. I've been lucky to train a lot of umpires, and you see a lot of people coming through sort of national grade, and they have ambition, but they kind of say to you, well, I don't really want to go much further than national. I don't really want to go much further than county level. And you can identify potential when you're out watching national championships and those levels, and you think, well, you really have got the potential to progress, so just take it and go for it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of commitment. There is a lot of, as daft as it sounds, there is a lot of stamina involved in terms of the bigger tournament, and people just don't think they could handle the pressure. And we've seen examples where people have taken the international leap and then stepped back a bit because they just can't cope with the added intensity of it, really.
Definitely, and I would imagine it's, I always feel guilty, and I sometimes feel as if I've, just called the umpire on for the sake that I've watched them during a 21-end game, just standing there doing absolutely nothing for the whole game, and I would imagine you can maybe correct us on this, but I would imagine that the pressure comes very similar to playing the sport, that you've got to be on the ball for 21 ends regardless, and you've got to be having full concentration, because there is going to be a point in that game or during, officiating, that you've got to be ready to come on and make quite a big decision. So I'm presuming the pressure of that is obviously having that, the concentration stamina must really affect a lot of people, because it's a long time to stand around potentially doing nothing and then be called on at any point during that game to come on and maybe measure something that's 5-6 millimeters apart and have to make that key decision. So would you class that as being the one thing that people step back because of that?
I think so. Yeah, there is a mental agility involved in this, and where you start getting games where you're easily distracted by what's going on around you. A classic example of that would be something like our English national championships, when you're playing a Liberty Trophy. You see people working a Liberty trophy indoors where it's noisy, it's intense, and there's 6 rinks going on, and it's busy, and there's a lot of shouting, and football rattles and horns and everything else going on. A lot of people can't concentrate in that environment. Yeah. And it's very different to what they would be doing perhaps at their local clubs or in their local areas, where they could be standing out in the pouring rain and freezing cold for 4 hours and not doing anything.
Definitely.
And it is a very big leap between the two, and you do need that mental agility to just keep going and be aware of what's going on around you.
My opinion has always been, once I've called an umpire on, I'm more than happy just to walk away and accept that decision, because I can't change that in any shape or form. It's, a lot of it is, I've got no doubt that there will be the odd error made now and again, but you can't do anything about that once the decision's been made. And it really irritates us when I see players literally standing over the top of umpires waiting for them to make this decision and call the shot. I just wish that players would walk away, let you do your job, and then not give a little bit of verbal abuse in some respects, because you hear it all the time. It was never that. It was never that. And I've probably been guilty of it, Alan. Yeah, I've been guilty of it. I would have my own opinion, and I would say I'm positive that was definitely not their shot or our shot, and I can imagine that can take a toll on a few people, because some people can deal with that and just blank it out, but some people might just hear a few comments and think, is this worth it for the effort and time and sacrifice that you actually put in to do the job?
You're spot on, and I think how an individual deals with that is key to their progression and how well they handle that sort of pressure situation.
Yeah.
I've always sort of been on of the view that you just have to work with the players. You're part of the team, and if you can make yourself part of the team and get on well with the players, have a chat with them, you've got to draw that fine line between going a little bit too far and getting involved.
Yeah.
I think getting involved and being that friendly persona and walking on, and if something goes a bit wrong, making a bit of a joke of it, or if they're surprised at results, turning around and saying something like, "Well, if you got them closer, you might have won the measure."
Yeah.
It'd be a bit flippant, but some of those things kind of dilute the real tension of the situation sometimes, and make you go on. And that carries right through to what I do now with World Bowls Tour and some of the pressures we have there. And I think I know you talked last week to Sean about some of the situations that occurred at the World Championships this year. What would probably be considered to be fairly minor mistakes or common mistakes, actually to us at that level are pretty major.
Yeah.
And you have to be resilient to that because you're in the spotlight then.
Definitely.
It's a big difference to your normal club where you maybe you turn the wrong bowl out or you call the wrong shot or something. Very different to that environment. So you have to be resilient as well.
You do, yeah. I can completely agree with that. And on sort of a national or even a global scale with regards to officiating, are you finding that the numbers are decreasing, or have they stayed pretty similar for a lot of years, or do you feel as if there's a lot of people? I do talk to a lot of people who say they would love to do the umpires course, but for whatever reason they don't do it. Is it something that is still very popular and people want to actually qualify to become an umpire?
I think we pretty much mirror the state of the sport as it is at the moment anyway. I mean, yes, there is a decline. Within England, there's been a huge decline in the number of members that we have and qualified umpires that we have over the last 10 years or so. When I was running courses, there was a steady number of people coming in. You would get probably anything between 10 and 30 new recruits coming through every 6 months, which sounds like a steady number, but then when you're losing a similar amount all the time, numbers tend to stay reasonably stable. But I think nowadays the majority of people that we want to attract to umpiring, which are the younger playing the game competitively, and they're the ones we really want to attract, but they've got to weigh up whether they play the game competitively or take up umpiring.
Like yourself.
Like myself, and I realised very early on that I was never going to make a great player and go to nationals and world championships and all that sort of thing. But it's attracting those younger players that understand the game in depth that is really difficult.
Yeah.
And whenever I used to start a course, I'd always ask the candidates, why do you want to become an umpire? And the most common answer generally is, well, I want to put something back. And that's great. That's what we really want. Is it somebody that's then going to keep going and keep it all held together as a team, really? And that's a challenge.
Definitely, and it would be nice. Like I say, it would you sometimes rightly or wrongly commonly sort of associate an umpire of somebody who's maybe played the sport to a certain age and have sort of want to continue in it, but know that the competitive side's maybe gone, and then they tend to maybe teeter towards the umpiring side of things. So I don't think I'm being disrespectful in saying there are a lot of umpires who are in the latter ages who have maybe, like I say, played the sport for a lot of years. But I agree with you, it would be nice to have younger umpires. And I did comment, I think it was on last podcast with Sean, about having been lucky enough to be down at Potters. I just think the umpires down there are absolutely fantastic. And I know you've lost 2 or 3 over the last few years, Brian, and I think Brian was the first ever umpire I ever had. And there's nothing better for a player than just being able to ask a question and get a direct answer and have that complete trust, and it's an opinion thing, and what you always get from yourselves is you've got a strong fancy for that, but you'll never put yourself on the line, and I think that's the big thing for a lot of sort of markers and umpires that we see. Personally, I hate marking games, and the officiating side of the game is something I try to avoid like the plague for whatever reason. It might be something I go into, but as daft as it sounds, I'm confident to stand on a mat and throw a ball, but I would hate to get in amongst a load of balls with a pair of calipers and try and measure something that was only 6 inches apart, because I've got a touch like a bull in a china shop, so it would probably...
we're only human.
Of course you are, yeah.
Just like players, we have bad days. And, certainly at the higher levels, international levels, you want to be as accurate as you can with your shot calls and your distances, because it's a game breaker for the player, and you want to practice those skills and you want to be good at it. But you can go on the rink. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, I've been on the Portable rink, and you just don't feel confident in what you're calling, and you kind of sit on the fence a little bit more in some games rather than call a definite.
Yeah.
But that comes with having the confidence in your own ability to be able to decide whether you're having a bad one or just sort of sit on the fence. But you get occasions where you call a shot and you just wish the next ball's going to move the jack because
just to make sure. Yeah, definitely. And it's in some respects, it's very similar to rugby or football with the VR system now. It's like every single eye, especially when it's televised. People are watching on YouTube, they're watching on TV, they're sitting in the crowd. So there's a massive responsibility on that call, and you know that if there is something wrong, it is going to be picked out and it's going to be magnified by 100% because unfortunately, like you say, everybody is watching it. Whereas in a standard game of singles, there's not that much pressure because you can just call it and maybe not have that much pressure. But again, like I say, I think everybody, especially the officials down at the World Bowls, did a fantastic job again. Like you said, you're only human and you can only give an opinion and go with your experience as much as anything.
It's also how you handle the situation when you've made a slight mistake. I mean, I'm not sure if you watched the game with Greg Harlow and Blake Nairn, the Australian. It was probably one of the best games I've experienced on the portable ring.
I did read your comment. Yeah, I saw one of your comments. Yeah.
He was such a fantastic guy. But there was one end where 2 bowls had been delivered and Greg had bowled a toucher. I'd marked it with chalk, thought nothing of it, stepped back, and Blake hit it. But he hit it that hard. Well, the only explanation we have is he hit it that hard it took the chalk off it.
Right.
Because I went to get the coloured markers for the bank to mark it in the ditch. I went to the bowl and I looked at it and I thought, I'm sure that's a toucher.
Yeah.
And I turned it over and turned it round and turned it over again, and there was no chalk on it whatsoever. So I took it out of the ditch, put it there as a dead bowl. And both players stood there and laughed at me and said that was a toucher.
Right.
The aftermath of that is, right, okay, so how are we going to get this back into the right position? Go and have a conversation with the offering umpire.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at it. He was watching. Let's see if we can replace it. And we did. We had a laugh about it, and it was fine. That could have been a game changer, but I think it being open, honest, and apologising profusely to both players when they walked up to the head, but also being able to have confidence in putting it back in the right place.
Yeah.
But it was a strange situation, and it sort of threw me for a few ends.
It's one of those things with the new chalk. It's bound to happen because it's only going to take the ball to be connected in a certain way, which rubs across the surface, and it wouldn't be any surprise that chalk comes off. You see marks on bowling greens all the times where the ball's rolled.
There was a skip mark up the
and there's 3 or 4 different marks on the run. Yeah, but probably the worst thing that an umpire could probably do in that situation is just turn around and say, well, that's the way it is, and I've made that decision, because I think that is one way that really gets players' backs up. Because we had a situation in a game last season where I remember, I think it was the international series actually, and the England lads next door to us on the next ring, the toucher had blatantly hit the jack, had gone into the back ditch, and because the lad hadn't chalked it before the next ball had come up, the umpire said that's not a live ball, and everybody stood on that green and said, well, we all know it's touched it, we've just, with everything shuffling around, etc., we've just forgot to put the chalk mark on it. And he stood there and was adamant to the fact of, no, that is not a toucher, it is to be removed out the ditch. And it ended up being removed, and I'm sure they lost a count of 4 or 5, something along those lines. And I think that is one thing that would certainly get my hackles up, because you've just got to use a little bit of common sense and just, like you've said there, talk to the lads and just speak to both rings. And I do know the opposition ring, who would actually favoured, also turn around and says, well, no, I definitely hit the jack, because that's the one that, that's why the jack's in the ditch. That would be, for me, the one thing that would cause an issue, where it's a case of, I am doing my job and there's no leeway either way. So like you said, just that little bit of talking to the lads, getting a little bit of understanding, making a joke of it in the end, just completely eases that situation straight away, and it's all forgotten about after that.
It's those sort of situations that are painful to hear, because as a trainer for many years, you drum into new umpires and even experienced umpires. Be proactive. Be out there looking for things that are a little untoward. Watch jacks being driven into the ditch. Watch bowls go into the ditch. Make sure you're aware. To be honest, 6 rinks is not difficult to cover, especially at one end. So you should be aware of everything that's going on really in the game. And I think what we see quite often is umpires take a bit of an interest in perhaps one rink. They star watch as well, and they tend to forget about rink 1 and 6, and yet there's all sorts of things going on over there, and it is painful to hear when umpires make a decision that is perhaps pedantic, but within the laws of the sport. But actually, if they were watching and being proactive, they would have realised that ball was a touch, and they would have used a bit of common sense and said, right, okay, get some chalk on that.
Definitely.
And there has been times where I've walked along the edge of the rinks and asked the players to chalk a bowl, because it's our job to uphold the laws of the sport as well.
Definitely.
And to advise players on what needs to be done on the rink. So,
definitely.
That would have been the easier solution to that. So it's difficult to hear that sort of thing.
Yeah, and like I say, it was just, maybe it's just been a one-off. But like I say, I think when both teams are turning around and saying it, that's where you've got to say to yourself as an individual, quite well, I'm not going to argue this point, because if it was to the benefit of another team and they're turning around and saying, no, they didn't chalk it, get it out, then fair enough, because then you've got a conflict of interest. You've got one team who are trying to state the laws and you're trying to protect the law, and the other team's trying to look for a little bit of common decency, so it ends up being a little bit muddled. But I think when both teams are saying it, then it's just an easy solution, really. You chalk the ball and you move on.
Work with the players, and
Yeah,
get
definitely.
a solution with the players,
There'll be more from Allan later in the show. Welcome to Richie's Roundup. Cue the music. 2 national titles have been decided. Spalding hosted the Under-25 Championships. In the women's event, Exonia's Nicole Rogers made up for last year's disappointment in the final by landing the title as she beat St Neots' Rebecca Morby in straight sets. Meanwhile, in the lads... Yep, that sound means that we lost the defending champion. In a repeat of last year's final, Malvern Hill's Ryan Atkins turned the tables on defending champion Conor Sinato. Congratulations to both Ryan and Nicole on their success. Highland Island hosted the latter stages of the Champion of Champions. In the women's event, Catherine Rednell racked up a 5th consecutive title success when she beat North Wilt's Alex Jacobs 21-17. Meanwhile, in the men's, there's a new name on the Roll of Honour as Kingsthorpe's Jamie Walker took the title, beating Melton's Chris Rogers 21-14 in the final. Many congratulations to both Jamie and Catherine. There's been more action in the open singles circuit since our last podcast. The Leicester event went to Barwell's Chris Moore, who beat Malvern Hill's Sean Jones 6-4, 5-4. Meanwhile, the Atherley event went to Oxford's Scott Edwards, who beat Ewart Roney 7-7, 6-1. The win for Edwards moves into top of the rankings, while Chris Moore jumps into the top 32 at 31. Next up is the Lonnon Vale, Worksop and West Berks events. The final round of fixtures in the Scottish Premier League was completed. Top of the table, Midlothian suffered their first loss, going down by 18 to West Lothian. Falkirk beat West Scotland by 17, while Ardrossan beat Fraserburgh by 37. Meanwhile, in the B League, Abbeyview had a good away win at Prestwick by 11. East Lothian also had an away win at Lanarkshire by 27, and a clean sweep for the away squads as Ballantyne beat Aberdeen by 5. The playoff final has been confirmed as Midlothian playing Bantire. The promotion playoffs, West Scotland will play Tweedbank, Prestwick will play Bainfield, both at Perth, while the relegation playoff will see Coatbridge play Paisley at Headwell. And round 11 in the Welsh Premier League has been completed. Second bottom Cannon Valley had a cracking 16-6 win at Port Talbot. Isywyn drew with leaders Cardiff but took it on points 13-9. Leonelli whitewashed Merthyr Tydfil, while Swansea beat Gwent 15-7. Cardiff's lead at the top is 24 points. The Under-25 Home International Series takes place at Stanley, County Durham. The entry cost is a programme, £3. It's cheap as chips. It takes place on the 15th and 16th of February. Everybody welcome. And that sound means we've lost more defending national champions. We've already reported in the Under-25 singles Connie Sinato's exit, and in the Champion of Champions defending champion Martin Puckett went out in the quarterfinals 21-14 to Exonia's Jamie Chesney. In the men's over 60 singles, Hornsey's David Tooley lost 21-15 at Selby against John Phillips, while in the over 60s pairs, Wellingborough's Paul Coley was beaten 21-7 at Kempston Park by Graham White. In the team events, the Denny Cup holders Exonia, the Liberty Trophy holders Durham, the over 60 inter-county Liberty Trophy holders Kent, and the Egham Trophy holders Exonia are all into the semi-finals. The latest short mat players tour event takes place this weekend as Falcon host the English Masters event. On show there will be 42 of the world's top 50, and there will be a live stream of selected games via the Short Mat Players Tour website. And finally, let's look back at our tips at the World Championships, mate. In the singles, well, me, you and Dom, well off the mark. Dom's Stu Anderson made the quarter-finals, while we put the kiss of death on Paul Foster and Alec Marshall. In the ladies' event, you went for Devon Cooper and I went for Nicole Rogers. We apologise to both of you. And in the mixed pairs, bring it on, I had the winner, Nicky Brett and Wales' Marion Purcell. And after those tips, all I can say, lads, is let's not give up the day job.
You are listening to the Wrong Bias Bulls podcast.
We apologise for the sound quality on the next section. Technology. Who would have it? Right, mate. The World Championships took place at Potters. Cracking fortnight, entertaining bowls, good watch. Congratulations to Robert Paxton. It's always nice to see a new name on the trophy. I think is it his third final?
Third time lucky, yeah.
And congratulations to Julie Forrest, who was affectionately nicknamed Forrest Bump. And I'd love to say I win it 3 years on the spin. One question I would possibly put out there is, could the women's get extended to 16 players?
The World Championships is actually open to everybody, and then you've got a separate one for women, but the women can enter the big one, vice versa. So
you've got loads of good players out there. Women's game, get them on, let people see it.
Definitely, and maybe if it was run similar to the tennis, where there is a specific men's championship and there's a specific women's championship, they can't enter the row, and you've got to stay in within, and there's a lot of women who would love to have that opportunity to play in it. So why have a combined one? Why not just have a men's world championship and a women's one? And I don't see why they couldn't. And I take my hat off to a couple of the girls who were down there, two young girls, first time. Nicole, wasn't it? And Devon, who were both there the first time. Played admirably.
And the other thing would obviously we have to chat about the bowl.
Yeah, it's you know what it is, fantastic. And I hate to be the bringer of doom on this, because it was an absolutely tremendous thing. And for me, I always look at the whole picture of what we saw from that bowl. That is, I think, like I say, it's probably hit the 20 million mark of around the world of people have watched that. Now, anybody who's involved in the sport, it was a fantastic bowl. Yeah, definitely. It was a tremendous bowl, and especially the fact that it was sort of nominated and played. Yeah. That's what a lot of people expect the top players to do, but to get through a 6-inch gap. But there's been a lot of videos on of various other shots. I saw one of Ryan Bester, Canadian, who played a running ball, and he's got probably the fastest and most accurate fire in the world. Cleaned off a load of balls and ended up lying a 6. I haven't been in a bad position, and it was just, my thoughts were amazing for the sport in a lot of respects. But then one thing that really frustrated us was, I watched an American chat show type thing. They were on there. They were, have you seen this shot? Unbelievable. How did he do this? And all the things that we want to hear as a sport. But then they rounded it off by hitting us back with exactly the perception that we are always saying kills this sport. They came back and said, but hang on a sec. Never mind the shot. Put the shot to one side. Look at that crowd. And they panned into the crowd and made fun of the crowd, which then put a whole negative sort of spin on what is a fantastic thing. Yeah. So that was frustrating. That's by the by, that's going to happen regardless. But the frustrating thing for me is, this has got to be a wake-up call or a kick up the backside or whatever it is to the organisations in bowls or somebody out there who's got a little bit of thoughts about how this game is going to go forward. And if people are willing to go, and there's 20 million people looking at that shot, which there are multiple shots like that happen in our sport across the rinks, you get everybody on who, you've had the mix of people who come on and say, amazing shot. Fantastic, Nicky. Yes, correct. You'll have the other people who come on and say, well, I've seen better than that. I've seen that.
That's right.
And that is the thing that, for me, we do see these type of shots, and our sport creates that type of shot. There will be 3 ball takeouts and, drawn within inches to do it. That is just what the game is about. So if we can get that much interest from that one shot, somebody's got to be sitting there and saying, right, what can we do now to build on that, which has been amazing? What can we do to improve the exterior of everything that goes on around that sport? Because if people are so interested in what's happening on the green and that shot that's been played, but then secondary talking about the surroundings, the focus has gone from what we're trying to sell for the sport.
That's right,
So any kid who would potentially watch that and go, how on earth did that happen? But then see the Mickey taken at the end of it, are going to go, hot to cold within 10 seconds.
Yeah,
so
exactly, mate.
It's there's got to be something looked at off the back of that now, and people have got to turn around and say, right, there is definitely an audience. There is definitely something out there where we will catch the public's attention because of the things that we can do in our sport. However, we have got to correct everything that surrounds it and make it more appealing to everybody who's watching that as well. Whether that's standing around the green with tables and people having a drink and having a laugh and having music and having, like they do in the sun and the dart, that is the thing that has got to happen. And I'm on my soapbox again here because it is.
I mean, I think the sport got on the One Show.
Yeah, got everywhere.
I think got on the One Show. I woke up the following day and Radio 5 Live, Rachel Burden had retweeted it out, and I'm going, and I checked, I'm going, what, 9 million views? Tremendous this. And then I did say the American show that you were on about as well, mate, and you know what it is? They said ball twice.
No,
ball.
One of your favourites.
Ball twice, and then of course the clip, and I'm going, I feel as if it's the image that the sport's never going to lose, to be honest, mate.
Well, it isn't when you get that sort of prestige, like that sort of following for something that was so good.
Yeah.
Potter's fantastic. What yous do, I said it previously, it's fantastic. Without yous, we wouldn't have balls on the TV.
Yeah.
Yous do a great job. Now, please, somebody within Potter's, whether it's your marketing department, whatever it is, get out on the table with the BBC, sit with them, turn around and say, look at what this has produced off just one ball in our World Championships.
9 million views.
What can we
20 million
What
views.
can we do now to avoid people having that perception? And we're not trying to take people who go there and support all the time, but do something. There are things that can be done that will just make this a more vibrant sport and more attractive for people who have never seen the sport before but are absolutely engrossed in how a ball can go pretty much sideways through a gap of 6 inches, touch a jack and sit against the other ball. Yeah. Fantastic shot, but unfortunately it was just degraded by what went with it.
Yeah. On the back of Sean's interview where she said people's quite easy to criticise and not come up with ideas. Well, I watched the under-25s games, and here's an idea for Potters. Why don't they move the under-25s to the Friday slot, play both semi-finals, go out to your local schools around the Potters area, offer them tickets, free tickets, get them in for both semi-finals, be like kids for the day. If you remember the tennis at Wimbledon, they had a People's Sunday, and the atmosphere was tremendous. Get the kids, just see if you can get the kids in. If they make a noise, they make a noise. It doesn't matter. I think the under-25 players would appreciate it.
Well, there's another opportunity there as well, just to back that up. Why don't you get the kids in, let anybody else who wants to come in and fill the seats, put your loud music on, do something different for those under-25s who won't give a jot, they will love the experience, do something different and see what the reaction is.
Yeah, exactly.
And use it as a bit of an
It's
experiment.
not covered by the BBC. It's on Facebook. There's your opportunity. There's a suggestion. Yeah. We do criticise a lot, but there's an idea. See if it gets up and running.
Yeah, and I've no doubt there may be a small minority who turn around and say, I don't want to listen to all this music, but I'll bet you there is a high percentage who turn around and say, that was absolutely tremendous. I wasn't getting stared at for creaking me seat.
You've hit a nerve there as well, because this is a dig at the players, and you did say before in one of the earlier shows, a noise in an empty house is echoed hundreds of times, but the looks that some of the players gave to the people when they made a noise, I'm saying, you play county games, you play home international series, there's people jumping in the air, hanging from the rafters, and because somebody's gone, get over it, man.
In the middle of winter, where there are 600-700 people sitting in an audience, I don't think you're not going to have many colds in there at that time of the year. So it is going to continue to happen all of the time. So you've either got to go one way or the other. You either continue to just block it out and stop giving the nasty things that don't look great on the TV. Yeah. Because even my mother turned around the other day and went, why do they keep stopping and staring and staring? They're like death eyes into the crowd, and it's like, it doesn't look good. So yet another thing that needs to be combated. So how do you go about combating it? Create a little bit of back atmosphere in there. Oh, I know there's restrictions on music because there's royalties and all of that malarkey, but there has got to be something that you can do to just create a little bit of extra noise so that these little creaks and things don't happen. And if not, give it a rest, man. Just play balls. Stop the petty staring. Soapbox off again. This must be a really, really strong box of soap, that's what I'll tell you.
And now we return to the interview with international umpire Allan Thornhill.
So we've talked about sort of the little mistake he made down at World. I must admit I didn't say. I'd heard a lot about. I started watching that game with Blake, and I didn't. Unfortunately, I was at work, so I didn't get to see the rest of it. But I'd heard the atmosphere was great, and I did see your comments saying it was one of your, one of the games you've thoroughly enjoyed, Mark, and from day one. Just quickly before moving on to that, is there anything else? We've all made the mistakes. Is there one mistake in particular that really sticks out, that is one that gives you a little bit of a nightmare now and again thinking back to it, or generally has it always just been a minor issue that's been sorted?
I think the big one that sticks out to me, which affected me deeply for quite a few months, was making a game-changing call at one of the World Bowls Tour tournaments. It was one of the tour card events, and I ended the game early. I'd made an error on the scorecard, and it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we didn't have a backup in terms of somebody else scoring.
Yeah.
Now we have almost three or four people looking at scores all the time. So I'd made a mistake on the scorecard, and I was distracted, and I called the game early, and I was devastated for the two players more than anything.
Yeah.
And I think that was a real low point. There was a lot going on around, outside of the WPT, but there's a lot going on elsewhere as well. And I guess I was probably distracted to a point where I'd made that mistake. And I think confidence then took a big dip, and you kind of think, is this right? Should I be doing this in this sort of under this sort of pressure? And you kind of question yourself for a little while. But the great thing is you have a network of people around you and that support you. The two players, I profusely apologise to both of them, and since then I've seen them both, and we kind of talk about it, and they're fine. But it was a tough time. Very, very rare, thankfully. I think that's probably the worst situation I've been in, because that is a game-changing situation. You're trying to avoid making mistakes that are game-changing if you can.
Yeah. Well, just feel free to send us an abusive message when you only get an hour and a half sleep tonight for reminding you of that one, Alan. So, obviously, you've had a fantastic career as a international umpire now, Alan. You've been all around the world. Is there a favourite destination, and any particular reason why you've enjoyed going out there?
Yeah, it's difficult to pinpoint one particular destination, really. I mean, I think we would all agree. I'm sure you do, because you were at the 2018 Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. I think Gold Coast is really high on the list, but everybody talks about Australia because it is such a great environment to officiate in and to play in. But I think I've been extremely lucky to go around the world, as you say. Commonwealth Games now, I've just done 2018 was my 5th consecutive Commonwealth Games. And every one of those has had some really good memories. We've got Birmingham coming up, and I'm sure that will be equally as memorable.
Yeah.
But I think the one that really sticks out to me more than anything is Delhi.
I had a feeling you were going to say that for some reason. I hear so many people talking about the Delhi Commonwealth Games, and
it was just so unique.
Yeah.
2010 Delhi. It was quite an interesting lead up to the event in that I was officiating at the National Indoor Championships, and the team doctor and some of the team were at the venue. And we sort of introduced each other and said hello, and I was going out to the games. And he gave me that sort of cursory glance up and down and said, it'd be good if you could lose a bit of weight. Cheeky sod.
I hear that every day.
But it was quite a good lead up to that, because I did lose 2 stone to go to Delhi, and I was so pleased that I did, because of the memories that I have. The heat is probably the everlasting memory, the grueling days. But I think also the team spirit that we had, not just within the officials, but also with the players as well.
Yeah.
The people that did go out from the UK did feel very much part of the UK contingent of players as well. It was all very good team spirit. And then, of course, you've got the bugs, both in the morning and the evening.
Yeah.
And actually, some of those were just hilarious. Some of those situations we found ourselves in. Jacks being moved by these great big water beetles.
I remember seeing that, yeah.
Well, hang on, that's not in the laws of the sport. But I think that one really stands out to me. I think a place that I've really sort of warmed to and have enjoyed over the years, because I've visited so many times, is Cyprus. I love going to Cyprus to officiate, and I've been over there a number of times to train umpires, work at the European Championships, but also did a couple of years with the Premier League Bowls.
Yeah.
That was a great experience out there. So I enjoy going to Cyprus as well. Made some really good friends over there.
Same,
and still are great friends as well.
Yeah, one of my favourite places in the world, Cyprus. Absolutely love it out there. And they've got a really good setup. I mean, the greens are a little bit, the artificials are a little bit tricky out there, because I think I remember last time that it had just literally been laid on concrete, so you were finding some extraordinary runs at times on there. But what a place to play! It's just absolutely beautiful. So that's great. And so I know Richie's got a couple of. I've just got one more for you before you go. I mean, I saw you in Wales in April for the Atlantics, and I think it's fantastic to see some emerging countries. And one I've talked about previously was France, and I've no doubt you saw the French team while you were out there. And I just think the professionalism of your French teams, and even your worldwide teams like your Malaysias and things like that, it's just really, really good to see, because the organisations are really putting a lot into it, and obviously trying to make their players the best that they possibly can. So I was just quite intrigued just to get your thoughts on, do you see that at the same sort of level within the British Isles as what we're seeing in the likes of the up and coming countries like France, Malaysia, etc.? Is there anything you'd like to see change, or anything that really irritates you a little bit when you're at these competitions? I don't mean to put anybody down in any shape or form, but you can see the complete difference. There's just certainly a professional attitude between some of the teams and others.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that you see with any new starter in anything you do. There's that keenness, there's that drive to succeed, and you mentioned the French players, and they are exuberant. They're in it to win it. They treat it as a sport, and they take it seriously and professionally. I think it's been quite interesting now that I've worked with the French team in Cardiff for the Atlantic Championships, but also in Cyprus for the Europeans, and just latterly with a couple of the players in the IIBC under-25s. And it kind of shocks some of the more established teams and players how dedicated they are to exercise, how dedicated they are to warm up, and how they approach the whole game. And it's been quite interesting, certainly in Guernsey with the Europeans. It affected some of the stalwarts games just by their behaviour. There was absolutely nothing wrong in terms of the rules of the sport that they were doing wrong. Yeah. But it just affected them. The mentality, they got into people's heads because they were just so exuberant. And it was quite interesting to see. And I think the one noticeable part about the teams that did well against the French was that they joined in with them. They competed in the same style and the same level. And I think, I'm not going to be derogatory about any country's teams or anything, because I'm no great player, so I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But you do see, I guess, a bit of apathy with some of the more established nations. It's almost like, well, we're going to win. We've been doing it for years. We're going to win. And certainly in Cardiff for the Atlantic, there were some huge shots.
Definitely.
Some of the developing nations pulled off some massive wins. Yeah, that's a bit of a worry, because we should have, as experienced nations, we should have that mentality to be able to deal with any situation. And I know Sean touched on it a little bit last time when going out to Australia and not being able to compete. I know there were different circumstances, but some of those developing nations can go out there and compete and get a win. Surely, as experienced nations, we can do the same. So it's quite an interesting. I guess that's what the psychologists are all about, and why we have team psychologists now. But it's quite an interesting dynamic when we see these new emerging countries. Yeah,
and that's sort of where I was sort of teetering towards with regards to. I certainly, like I say, I agree with you. There's nothing derogatory to be said about any country, because each country will go out there and set up the way they want to set up. But you just look at some of these countries that have just seemed to have appeared from nowhere, and you look at what it's all about, and we look, and potentially we talked about it before, a couple of our lads were laughing because they were up at the World Under-18 Championships recently up in West Denton, and they were laughing because the French were running around the green and things like that. But it's only wrong because it's so different to what's happened in the past. And I just think you look at the standard and the quality of some of the players we have in the British Isles, which are, bar none, they are just massive talents, but I just think they could be even bigger with the right sort of mentality hospitality set up as, let's say, where you've got a coach sitting at the end of the green with a camera for Malaysia and are watching every little intricacy of what goes right and what goes wrong during games, and then feedback. And there just seems to be a little bit more structure there. And I don't think there's anything against, obviously, any team managers from the countries, and I know costs become involved in that, and especially within England, it's quite hard for somebody from the north to come down and meet with somebody in the south, because it's, financial implications come on. But I always think to myself, how far could some of the players within the British Isles actually get in this sport with that same structure behind them? Which sure. I just, and like I say, I'm trying to say this in the right way without sounding as if I'm twisting or whinging, but I just think there's more that could be done to get the best out of those players.
Sure, and I think from my perspective, standing on the bank, what we've seen in recent years, certainly since Glasgow, really 2014, is the back support that players have, and you would have experienced this in Gold Coast. The level of the managers, the coaches, the people sitting on the end of the rinks, as you say. It's there, but what more does it need to get us? What's the difference between a French team that probably has just one coach sitting at the end of the rink, or a Swiss team that has a family member sitting at the end of the rink? What is the difference between that and the big network that people like Scotland and England and Wales have around them in these events? And I don't know the answer, because I'm not privy to that sort of detail, but certainly from my perspective, standing on the bank, it's been quite interesting seeing the dynamic and seeing how things have changed in the last 5-6 years with the established nation.
Definitely, and it's certainly, I think that's something that just there isn't a direct answer you can give to it, but there's certainly learnings I think we can take from it. I think is probably the ultimate answer from all of it, and just try and find out what the key is to these smaller nations that are now up and coming actually achieving and overachieving in a lot of respects against players that have been there, done it, got the experience, but are maybe still not just doing what they're capable of. So yeah, totally agree. So I'll pass you over to Richie. I know Richie's got a couple of quick questions that there are a little bit of pet hates with him.
Hi, Alan, you all right?
Hi, Richie, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I've got one question and a couple of pet hates that I'd like to get your thoughts on. The quality question is, what one rule would you change or introduce into the game?
Yeah, interesting one. I guess I'm in quite a privileged position to be on the World Bowls Laws Committee, which oversees the laws of the sport now worldwide. Yeah. And I think currently the law's pretty tight. We've got a couple of tweaks that we need to make, but they're sort of minor tweaks that aren't really game changers. But I think one of my, we're going to mention pet hates, but I guess one of my pet hates really is the whole issue around foot faulting and position on the mat. And it's one of those ones where I've always felt that we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. And it's not a particularly robust law. It's one of those things that's very difficult to detect in terms of the speed that something's happening, and there's none of this electronic wizardry that we have in tennis or anything, but it's one of those things that's very hard to detect and to pull up for an infringement. But actually, when you do put it up for an infringement, all you got is a warning and 2 knocks and you're out, really. So I think that's the one thing. I don't know the answer to it, because I kind of don't know how we would enforce it realistically. But what I'm going to do is turn it around a little bit and turn around to the coaches and say, actually, there's an onus on you guys to help us solve this problem. Teach the players to stand on the mat to a point where they're not going to be breaching a foot fault if they drive, or if they want to use the edges of the mat, then use it to a point where they know they're going to have their foot over it.
Yeah. I know when I watched the recent televised event, there was a few. I'm looking at them saying, well, it looks a bit foot faulty, and especially the fires. When people fire, I think it's nigh on impossible to detect somebody's foot faulting.
One of my views about the whole thing is to put a little bit more of an onus on us as officials, really, and look at what advantage the player's gaining from it. I've always been of a mind, whenever I was training umpires, I was always of a mind that you have to look at what the player's gaining out of foot faulting. Is it a deliberate foot fault, or is it something that they do all of the time, every single bowl?
Yeah.
Just because they stand in the wrong place on the mat. And I think the classic examples are where you swing your back leg out, you take a wide step out with your front foot, take a wide swing with your back foot to gain that extra couple of feet of green. Those are deliberate. A drive, as you say, some of these power drivers are off the mat before the bowls come out of the hat.
I mean, you'd have to have VAR to decide some of them.
Exactly, and you know what?
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not going to stop that bowl.
You're too right, I'm out the way, mate.
We've been talking about Blake then. There's no way I'm going to stop it if it takes chalk off the bowl.
Too right. Right, and...
I think the foot 14 thing is a bit of a challenge for me. It's one of my little pet issues, but I really don't see an answer to it currently, because, as I say, I think we're damned if we do penalise, and we're damned if we don't.
I think it's probably the one that causes, for anybody to pull anybody up foot faulting, the player's back goes up straight away, doesn't he? So, foot fault, what are you on about, mate? What are you on about?
Did with me. 5-6 years ago, I was playing in a county competition, and I've pretty much had the same delivery for, crikey, I don't know how many years, and he pulled us up 3 times, and I was like, I was not a happy boy through that game. I really wasn't.
And I've seen it being enforced at the Commonwealth Games in Manchester when a player got penalised for it, and it caused an absolute uproar.
I was going to say, yeah.
Now there are ways of dealing with these things, and it goes back to what I was saying to David. The way that you deal with something often gets the good result. And if you deal with these things by running up the green with your arm in your head screaming foot fault, then you're not going to make any friends.
Yeah.
But it's what people don't see, and you mentioned Richie on the portable rink. What people don't see is what we do behind the scenes and the conversations we have at the end of the rink.
Right.
Sometimes we do have a quiet word, not just foot faulting, but certainly rink possession, especially with like the 30-second shot clock.
Let's follow the ball up. Yeah.
We do have quiet words. It's never going to get to the point where we're going to stop a bowl because something's foot faulting. It's just not.
So
it's not practical, but B, it's unnecessary because nobody is out there to seek advantage by doing it.
Have you ever pulled anybody up for foot faulting?
Not to a point where I've penalised.
Not to penalised, but you've had a quiet word.
I have, in terms of at the end of the ring, asked the player to watch their feet and watch where they're placing them. And the other thing about how to deal with things is actually explain what the outcome's likely to be.
Yeah.
I find it quite interesting listening to rugby referees because they're loud and clear, and they're very concise in telling a player what the likely effect is if you do it again. And I've always sort of taken that approach of explaining to the players, look, if you do that again, then I can stop the bowl and I can have that declared dead, and they tend to stop them.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Rather than punch the lights out. Yeah, one of my pet. Well, I've got 2 pet hates, but one of my pet hates, and I see it creeping into county games a lot. You've got the poor umpire run ragged, going from rinks 1 to 6, and the number of times that I see third men not even attempting to do a measure, and they take the lazy option of calling the umpire on. Do you think they should just say, well, we've got to put the Mets in your pocket, do the job first, help the umpire?
That's an interesting one, Richie, because firstly, in terms of the order of play, if you like, for that, it's the player's decision to agree on the shots, and it's down to them. So by all means, get down on your knees and measure it, and then it falls in singles, it falls to the marker, and then ultimately to the final decision to the umpire. And I kind of, certainly within things like singles, I kind of feel, certainly at the higher level, that it's far easier, quicker, and you get the result immediately if you call an umpire straight away rather than the players and the marker get down on their knees.
Yeah.
In team games, I agree. I don't know what games you're at. If the umpires run ragged, that's pretty rare.
Hey, Durham would do a lot of measuring up in Durham area. We don't just kick them out like the Southerners.
That's because you can't tell which you shot by looking at it.
Exactly.
But I think you're right. I think the onus should be a little bit more on the players to make an agreement. However, counter that by saying, well, the more times you measure something, the more danger there is in the result changing.
Yeah.
And I've seen some horrific measuring from players. Where they're chasing the jack around the rink by the end of the and you kind of think, why don't you just let me get on there? I think there's that very fine line between an umpire standing there doing nothing with a pair of calipers in his hand at the end of the rink, and the players are trying to squeeze a box measure into 4 inches.
Yeah.
And just getting on there and doing it. And I think you're right in some respect, but in others, I'd much rather keep the game flowing by having somebody make a decision.
Right.
Well, I'm completely on your side, Alan. Take no notice of Richie,
Get
because I
out.
didn't give a stuff what his pet hates or he's taught a load of rubbish.
Get out, you.
You know you're all right for better,
You
David.
smack in the mouth. Yeah. It was so, yeah. And you possibly answered my other one, because my other one was a singles game where the player asks for a second opinion when the marker's already measured and says, well, I think that's shot. And you've got, well, I didn't fancy it, get an umpire, get somebody from the bank side on, and that's me pet hate, because I think it just undermines the marker, to be honest. We're not talking at a high. You're sort of like talking early county rounds, club competitions.
I think it does, to an extent, undermine a volunteer that's come on to help you out. I know how difficult it is to get markers, and I know you talked last time with Sean about how difficult it was to get markers on. Should you be playing games without a singles marker and that sort of thing. And I think if you're going to have a marker, use them, abuse them, but you've got to have that trust in them as well. And I think you've got to have that. You've got to balance their abilities with what you want to get out of the game.
Yeah.
And you're right. Certainly at a high level, we would tend to bypass the marker and just get the umpire on.
Right.
That's not a sign of their inability. That's more of a keep the thing flowing and make a decision kind of situation. With markers, I think you have to trust them as players, because at the end of the day, it's your game. And if you're not happy with that decision they make, or you're not quite comfortable with their measuring technique, then by all means call an umpire on. But by the same token, you've got to have that same level of trust in the umpire to do a better job.
Yeah.
Either using the same equipment or something a bit more accurate.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely, it just reverts back to that situation we talked about earlier, where if you call somebody on to make that decision, I would like to, I don't know if there is a rule in place, but I would just love to see the fact that you have called that person on to make a decision, you just get out of his way and let him make it, because you could argue about it all day, but that's why that person is officiating the game, whether it's an umpire or a marker. If you're going to ask them to do something for you, just let them do it and let them get on with it. Don't then start having a second opinion on what it is.
And there always used to be that etiquette of if you call the umpire, just get up on the bank,
get out
move
the way.
away, let them get on with it. I tend not to worry too much about that sort of thing. I certainly don't tell people to go and stand on the bank, but as long as they're not in my way and not standing over me, intimidating me in any way, they can watch for all they want, But that's more of an etiquette of the game. Is just get out, let somebody make a decision and get off. But occasionally you get those glances coming towards you. Is that the right decision?
Human nature. Unfortunately, it's just everybody's got an opinion, and it's. Well, no, Alan, fantastic. You're an absolute credit to the sport, Alan. I've met you on a number of occasions, and I know whenever I've had a question, I've dropped you a couple of questions in the past, which you've just come straight back to me and sort of reassured what I thought was the answer, or maybe had no clue. So, without giving you a little bit of extra work, I would recommend to anybody who's wanting to know any sort of intricacies or rules in the game. I know you're very open to people approaching you and asking the question.
Any of the social media questions, and I've got a website with Ask Umpire on it. So there's various methods of contacting me for that. I mean, from my point of view, it's just a pleasure to work with players like yourselves and put something back, which is where we really started.
Definitely.
Just put something back and help you guys play the game that you love. And always open to helping whoever needs to ask a question.
That's great, Alan. And like I say, you are fantastic at what you do. So continue to do the great work that you are. And just for anybody who is obviously listening who might have an interest in becoming an umpire, I believe it's www.ebua.org.uk. Is that right, for the Umpires Association?
If in England, certainly if they're in England, the EBUA, which is the governing body for umpires, and if they're elsewhere, the national governing bodies of Scotland, Wales, just contact them and look on their websites, and there's usually an umpiring link. And take the plunge, turn to the dark side, take the course and learn a little bit more about the laws.
Great stuff, Alan. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Alan. And like I say, it's been great to listen to your insight into the, not so much the playing aspect, but the officiating side. It's been great. So thanks very much, and hopefully see you in the near future, Alan.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you both, and keep up the fantastic work you're doing with this podcast. It really is great to at last get something out there that people are listening to. It's really good.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Cheers. Bye now. Bye.
And for our competition on the Umpire Strikes Back, the question we're going to ask you this week for our prize, again, I always mention them, it's great to have the support of Alex Marshall Sports. We will advertise the prize that you're playing for on the Facebook page and on Twitter. But the question for this one is, which destination did Allan say was his favourite destination where he has been out and officiated? So all we need to do is just hear what that destination was. Drop us a message on the Facebook page, drop us a message on Twitter, or you can drop us an email on wrong.bias@hotmail.com.
Well, mate, before we wrap up show 8, we've had a couple of emails again. We've had one from Ryan from Cumbria, and Ryan asked about set dates and shift work. Now, we can only talk from the Durham perspective. We've introduced set dates the last 3 or 4 years, and I think they're great. I know it's not very good for shift workers, but there is the leeway of, as long as you've got the game played before the next round.
We played earlier, but if you've only got, if let's say you play on the Thursday in one round, do you then have to go and play that on the Monday to be able to squeeze that into the Thursday?
Right.
And then the following week he cannot obviously follow that up. I think there's got a little bit of flexibility in the early rounds, where I do like them being the fixed dates, don't get us wrong, because I think it just gives you, it's got to be played on that date. I've always said 2-week county fortnight, which is basically you get down to, let's say, the last 16 in the county, and for 3 days consecutive you will play the fours off to a finish, then you'll play the trips off to a finish, then the pairs off to a finish over that 2-week period. The reason I like that idea is because it gives you a year in advance to know that that's when your 2 weeks are. I can organise plenty of time within work just in case I get through to that stage. If not, you can cancel your holidays. You can book holidays around it. How many times do we see people getting subs in because their mates away on holiday because they didn't know when a particular date is? It really creates a better calendar.
I'm sure Ryan replied in a following on email where he's probably conceded more county competitions.
Which isn't right.
Which is wrong.
You know, we need to be encouraging everybody to play the sport and try. I know we can't help everybody all of the time, but there is certainly things we can do to make it a little bit easier for people who maybe do shift work or are parents or whatever. Yeah.
We also had another email from Alan. And he was just asking us if we'd introduce a coaching section discussing drills, tactics and any pre-match routines, which I think we will take on board and possibly do it in the next one or the one after that.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe try to get in touch with the coaching organisation to see if somebody wants to come on, and maybe a good one to ask players who we get on in the future as to what routine they particularly go through, and have they got any sort of things that they make sure they do. Do they eat a particular thing before a match? Or like me, if I'm in a week's competition, I'll not take my underpants off. I'm only joking.
Too much information. You do realise I'll have to put a PG on this episode.
But then the last thing, just to finish off with, because we haven't actually done it on this show to date, so I'm going to drop you right in one here, because we're going to do my 7-up questions, and I'm going to give it to you. Who better than a British Isles Triples champion? Easier questions, and a couple of ones on here we've used before, but you're getting them anyway. So, favourite green?
Indoor would be Crotery Leisure Centre because I'm sentimental. Outdoors would be Horton Dairy Lane.
Crotery Leisure Centre was in Sunderland as well, just for everybody. And what balls do you use?
I use Green Tigers size 4.
A bit smaller than the 7s you used to use.
Best, I do have a set of 7 Henselite Classics in the loft that I get out when I'm struggling, and it's like a Control-Alt-Delete to any computer wizard out there, and I recommend it to anybody.
Comfy blanket.
Exactly.
Corma or Vindaloo?
It would have to be Corma.
Oh, you was. Best match you've ever played in?
Best match I've ever played in was probably going to be when we played Tony Alcock in the National Triples final. 92 with Jimmy and Gary. I was just a band.
Toughest opponent, either team or individual?
Toughest opponent would be Jimmy Lammett.
Ronaldo or Messi?
Ronaldo, because he's got the same body build as me.
Okay then. Future ambition in the sport?
Future ambition in the sport would be to continue enjoying it. I think I love it. I enjoy watching a lot now, which I used to hate. Yeah, that would be it, mate.
I think I've got that to come.
Yeah.
And that is your 7-up questions, Mr. Mackay.
Thank you very much. Do I get a can of 7-up for that?
No, you've got to get 7 shots to go.
Oh, well, you knew I wouldn't be counting anyway, it'd be only 6. Well, mate, after that, that's the end of number 8, mate. It's gone It's been a long one. I might be doing a bit editing.
I know. To be honest, I think we said during the conversation with Alan, I looked at the phone, and it, for me, that always gives me an indication of how well the talk's gone, because 50 minutes had gone in a flash.
Well, thanks very much, folks. I hope you enjoy it, and see you again.
Yep, thanks all. Thank you for listening, and hope you've enjoyed the show.
This has been a Dodgy production.